I'm sitting outside the castle on a lovely sunny day with quite a breeze. And my guest today is General Sir Andrew Gregory, who's controller of a wonderful charity called SSAFA, which helps those who serve in the country today. And we met when we were raising money for them in 2018. We were marking the end of the First World War, and it was a joy to welcome Andrew and his wife Sally, and from there on to get to know them better and continue our work with SSAFA. So welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much for coming today. And perhaps maybe I should ask you to start by explaining what you do.
So, Lady Carnarvon, great honour to be here in this beautiful setting, as you rightly say, on this lovely sunny day. So after a lengthy career in the army, I now, as you rightly say, am the controller of a charity called SSAFA, which stands for Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen and Families Association. It was set up in 1885 to look after the families left behind when the 2nd Expeditionary Force went to Egypt, long before the National Health Service and the welfare state were present. And since then, we have focused on supporting those who are serving, have served, and their families to make sure they have independence and dignity when they need assistance.
Well, I think that is brilliantly summed up why I feel so strongly about it, Andrew. It's an amazing charity. I hadn't realised how old you were in the nicest possible way. And it's a great connection with Egypt, given that the 5th Earl of Carnarvon discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun. So Egypt is very much at the heart of what we share in the castle today.
It is, and your family have been wonderful supporters of the charity. So the fifth Earl,
who was the Egypt Earl,
the Carter and all that, was a vice president of SSAFA in Hampshire, and your husband, the 8th Earl, is also a vice president of SSAFA. And their support, and indeed your personal support, Lady Carnarvon, and the commitment you've shown to people in the armed forces more broadly, and particularly SSAFA, is quite phenomenal. Thank you.
No, it's nothing at all, but thank you for working with us. And the 2018 celebration where I first met you was amazing because it brought together, the red arrows in the air to inspire us, and then the church ceremony on the Sunday and all the different ambassadors, and we welcomed anybody from the force who wanted to come just to say thank you and to remember them. And I think this is an amazing house for doing that.
It is an amazing house and grounds. And your heroes at Highclere, as you called it in 2018, was phenomenal. I think it's also important to remember that most people who serve in the armed forces in this country, and indeed in other democratic armed forces, the United States particularly, are better for their military service. They are given values, they are given standards, and they come out and take a good second career. But some find it difficult, and that's why charities like ours are there to support them. In many ways, it's easy for those in the military, and when I go off on an operational tour, as I did, and leave Sally behind, she's got all the worry. She's got our 2 boys to look after, she's got the house to run. I have a single focus, and she is waiting for that terrible knock.
It can be quite lonely.
It is very lonely and it is very stressful. So the families are a critical part of the military community and what the charity is here for.
No, I think it's incredibly important, actually, and I'm always trying to create family days out to make sure everybody comes together, and it's not just the serving men, however important they are. And I think on that day we also had an army recruiting tent, and I know that I think you're going to come and be with us on the History at Highclere. It's the inaugural history festival, which I'd wanted to do. Given that we sort of passed by VE Day, I thought I would roll some of the commemoration of VE Day of May the 8th into October the 10th this year, just to pause, to remember, to think about the aftermath, to think about what our ancestors and families went through, actually for nearly 6 years, for 5 long winters. Their lives were indelibly changed, wholly refocused. What they wanted to do, they perhaps couldn't do. And I know we have an unbelievably challenging time at the moment, both emotionally and I think economically above all, which will then also feed back into the emotional side. But with any luck, it's perhaps for a year or so as we begin to pick up the vaccine and go forwards and begin to walk again over into the next few years. Perhaps a year of emotional concern is an underestimation, but I suspect we'll be able to lead a little bit more normal lives a little bit earlier than they did then.
Well, Lady Carnarvon, let's hope so.
Yeah.
I think it is interesting because your heroes at Highclere, as you rightly say, focused on the 100th anniversary of the end of the Great War, the 11th of November 1918. This year we've had the 75th anniversary of victory in Europe. And the Second World War is something we should never forget. It is the bloodiest conflict in history. Over 70 million lives were lost during those 6 years. And that is something we should never find ourselves facing in this world again. And the people in this country and many other countries went through great hardship and a lot of sacrifice to make sure we have the freedoms we enjoy today. And that is why it's terribly important we recognise it. And as we go through the difficulties...
And perhaps I shouldn't compare actually what we're going through today to what's then. I think it's just trying to pick up some of the hardships to which you much more eloquently referred and just remember them and think that we can work our way and find the rules which will help us live through it and come out the other side.
Well, I don't think you should underestimate the challenges many people have faced over the last few months. And certainly in SSAFA, we are getting increasing number of calls from people who are suffering great isolation and quite a lot of personal emotional distress. And I think that is going to increase, sadly, as we go into the autumn and winter, as some of the support schemes taper out. I fear unemployment is going to go up further and a lot of households are going to find life very difficult. And making sure, as we did during the Second World War, that communities continue to pull together, and that another great strength of this country, which we saw in the early days of the lockdown, the volunteering spirit continues, where 750,000 people put their names forward to support the National Health Service. Fantastic. We need that community spirit and people working together to help us all get through, because some people are finding this here in the United States and elsewhere very, very difficult.
It's been very good to welcome some visitors back here, and funnily enough I think this is a place that can give confidence because we've got so much outside space. You can see by the emails the nervousness and the anxiety, and I hope by the time they leave they're feeling much happier, more confident and able to deal with a few more things with a cooler head, which perhaps always helps. But I think actually the furlough is a little bit of a bubble, as you say, and I think the autumn is going to be very tough, which is again I think why I wanted to address some of the challenges and through looking at an online Just Giving platform raise some money for some of the charities such as yourselves or Médecins Sans Frontières, who are supporting those in hardship actually, because many of the events with which we were seeking to support charities ourselves through this year, they've all passed by and we've raised nothing. No one's raised anything, and it is a huge problem, and going into the winter it's going to be a tough winter.
So charities have found it financially difficult, as indeed many businesses have found it. SSAFA, the Armed Forces charity, financially we are sound, but this year is difficult. Next year will be more difficult, and 2022 will probably be more difficult still, because many of our traditional supporters will have less money available. That's both corporates and individuals. And we think the levels of hardship is going to go up. I think why people so enjoy coming to Highclere is because one of the things they've lost during the lockdown is a sense of perspective. So particularly if you're in a flat or a house in a town, your perspective has reduced enormously. And coming here with the scale and the wonderful views and the beautiful grounds suddenly you get a sense of perspective back, and that will be really important for them, and it will help their mental well-being enormously, which is why you've probably had such wonderful emails back to you.
Well, the perspectives are there, and I also think it's the horizon, because I've certainly struggled because there's nothing on my horizon to look forward to. I'm simply travelling through each day, as many people are, and I think it's the horizon as well here, which physically you can actually see the horizon and the trees and the woods, and that helps you think that there will be an emotional, mental horizon you can look forward to as well. So for all that, we are so fortunate to have the space around, and inside the castle the rooms are big and spacious and high, and the windows are always open. So all that has been interesting, which again is, I suppose, why I'm turning round our different emotions and challenges, just to focus once more on what VE Day might have been and how to reference it once again in October in terms of considering what it might have meant, Andrew. So I'm probably expressing myself better at the end of our discussion than at the beginning.
No. I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think just to pick up the point about the flatness of life, I'm sure you and many others know Bill Murray's film featuring the star of the show, Punxsutawney Phil, Groundhog Day, where everything is the same. I think that has been a challenge for many people. I've worked throughout the lockdown. I've worked from home. Normally I would travel up to London, and I haven't done it. But each day has rather blurred one into another as I've sought to make sure we can continue to support those in need. Yes. And we have done it, and I'm very proud of our staff and volunteers and the way they've done it. I think your History Festival in October is a great opportunity, because hopefully...
Not so many people here, Andrew, but I think, again, through the virtual world, which we've all turned our hands to, and we've sort of leapt forward in a few months, which what might have taken us years.
We have.
But I think there's no bad thing, so I don't need to have thousands. It would be nice to have a few hundred for atmosphere, and then it's a way of sharing the stories, the history, and sharing it in perhaps even a global fashion.
I think, as you rightly say, we've all learnt a great deal over the last 4 months.
About ourselves, apart from...
About ourselves.
Well, for me, anyway.
Well, I think all of us have. And about how technology can allow us to run our lives differently. Less travel, terrific. Less carbon emissions, all of that sort of stuff. The pandemic has slightly pushed climate change into the background, but it's still very much there, and it's something we need to address. So what we need to do is take forward the best bits of what we've learned over the last 4.5 months, but also make sure we don't lose some of the good things. So some of the face-to-face contacts I miss enormously with my staff, my volunteers, and indeed the clients, and nothing can replicate that. But what we can do in October through your festival, and both a small physical presence and a much larger virtual presence on various mediums, is make sure we can tell the tale of service. Yeah. Because I think what we saw in the Second World War is people who served, they put the greater good above themselves. And during this lockdown, people have done the same. They have put themselves at great risk for the greater good. And that is where there is an absolute parallel between a national crisis between 1939 and 1945 and what we've seen. And to celebrate that service is what we all should do, and applaud those who put others before themselves.
No, I completely and utterly agree with that. And in the future, I'd like to reach out to the care home staff who have really faced their challenges with such extraordinary courage, and they were facing probably the greatest risks and have gone through the greatest trauma in nursing those who were loved by other people.
They have gone through great trauma, and I think I was listening to the news a couple of days ago, somebody who worked in a care home or ran a care home saying normally we'd lose 2 or 3 residents a year. We lost 9 in May.
I think I was listening to the same thing.
And that, I don't think we should underestimate the difficulties that the staff in those homes will face. They will need support because they will feel perhaps they let down those individuals. And nationally and locally, we need to make sure that as we hopefully continue to come out of lockdown and can engage more, that we can support people like that, just as I'm here to support people in the military and their families when they need assistance. Some will, some won't.
There are not so many of the Second World War generation left, are there now, Andrew? A few who were very precious.
Sadly, that's right. We lost the last of the Tommies from the First World War 3 or 4 years ago, and the number of veterans from the Second World War is much reduced. Certainly people in the United Kingdom, I hope, will have heard of the wonderful Captain Sir Tom Moore, knighted by Her Majesty recently at Windsor Castle, who set out to walk round his garden and raise £1,000 for National Health Service charities, and raised £33 million. That is a phenomenal achievement. And I think what comes across, he served in the West Yorkshire Regiment, is his humility when he talks. I had the privilege of meeting another remarkable individual just over a week ago, a former Royal Marine called James Wren. He was 100 on the 22nd of April. He joined the Royal Marines. He was on board HMS Repulse when she was sunk by the Japanese on the 10th of December 1941. He managed to get off the ship and get to Singapore, where he joined the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. He fought with them. He was captured. He spent 3.5 years as a prisoner of war of the Japanese. To survive that and the horrors that befell many of his comrades was a remarkable achievement. He is another man who shows great humility, but more recently has been determined to make sure what happened to his generation is not forgotten. And as it says on the Kohima epitaph, or the Kohima memorial, the Kohima epitaph, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today.
Yes. One of the things that mattered to me was at Heroes to welcome the Army recruiting tents, because I think it's always asking you perhaps why you joined the Army, what inspired you, what was your passion, why did you join the Army, Andrew?
Why did I join the Army? So I had a brief career in industry first. For some of the older listeners to Lady Carnarvon's podcast, a company called Metal Box, and I was sponsored by them and then became a shift foreman in a factory in Hull. My father had been in the Army. My mother had served in the Women's Royal Naval Service. Both served during the Second World War. My father was quite badly wounded on D-Day. I joined because I got to an age, 24, where I thought if I don't do it now, I won't do it. I want to serve. I want to challenge myself. I want to get the variety that comes with it. I joined for 3 years. I stayed for 35, which was never quite...
A bit like Highclere, isn't it?
Well, once you're in, you never leave. What kept me in? People have said, what would have caused you to resign and leave? Would it have been if the Army had shrunk below a particular size or anything like that? And what would have caused me to leave was if the organisation had ever changed its values and its standards. So the British Army has 6 core values: courage, loyalty, integrity, discipline, selfless commitment, and respect for others. Those are values I'm very proud of. And I felt I did my best to uphold them during my service. I am proud one of my 2 sons is serving in my regiment, the Royal Regiment of Artillery, and he too, hopefully, is living by those values. I joined, it was a bit random. I stayed because of those values. I had a great career. I met some great people. I did some great things. And for young people today, where it is going to be difficult outside for the next 2 or 3 years, if you want to challenge yourself and
I think it's great because it gives you a strategy, it gives you a horizon, it gives you
it gives you that, but it also gives you a structure and a sense of family. And my best friends are definitely people I've met over the years during my military service, and they will be friends for life. And I think most people who've served in the military would say that. So I would commend it to anybody. Many people say, well, I don't like the discipline and all this sort of stuff. It will give you structure. And I think, as you rightly say, as the autumn and winter come, where there is definitely going to be some real challenges for our economy and for society, the armed forces are a great opportunity for young people. I'm not being paid by them to say this.
They are inspiring, and I think they do give structure, and I try to employ some younger people here. We've always got apprentices, and it's always trying to bring them in to give them the structure of the day and the structure of a career. And I think both those things help, and I think Highclere is about a community and a family, and I would definitely hope that we share some of your values in terms of respect for others and courage, loyalty, and the loyalty is amazing. And I think that when Geordie and I took over from his father, the one thing that I didn't want to do was disturb those who'd been here for a long time, and they had served and given their life to Highclere, and it was trying to understand that myself as I began to step into the shadow of what they were doing as well. And they're still here, and I think that's perhaps what I'm proudest of. And I've done a podcast with Les, who is 93 going strong and has served with Highclere, been part of Highclere for longer than he was in the police force. And Pat Withers, who's decorated here for now over 60 years, which is marvellous because she can tell me what a room was like
Well,
nearly by the Second World War. But it's that longevity, the loyalty, the sense of family and community. And that for sure has helped us enormously over the last challenging time. And then again, I'm consciously trying to pick them up with me in terms of team spirit, which is where I started this morning, trying to help them as we, particularly one particular team, as we go forwards towards the autumn and winter, which I think we're all approaching, where we need caution and care and as much information as possible.
We will do. And some people will find it very or increasingly challenging. I think we've been quite lucky, certainly in this part of the country, with some reasonable weather during most of the lockdown. The days are long, the nights are shorter, and as that is reversed, inevitably people's mood goes and morale goes down. Communities, teams will be so important, and you have a great one here. And as you rightly say, you are very loyal to your staff, and they repay that loyalty with commitment over many years. I think the armed forces offer the same sort of community.
I think they do so much, and I'm conscious of the, sort of the band of brothers when I walk into it. And I've also supported another charity actually in Reading called Launchpad, which helps homeless people in Reading, often men, and they're often ex-army. And I've gone into some of the rooms and meetings, and the sense of loss when sometimes you step out of the army is immense, and it really made me understand the value of what Launchpad do as well, to try to rebuild, to mentor, to give them their sense of dignity and worth back again. So that's also been another very good journey just to look into.
It's a great journey, and it's why for SSAFA our two words in our mission statement are about giving people back independence and dignity. And those words are really important.
I think also an appreciation, because at the Heroes there was various men from the army who came up to me, and actually some ex-Vietnam soldiers had come from America, which was very moving, and it was just saying thank you, and that appreciation for what they did go through, for whatever the political judgment is in arrears, nevertheless for the personal people who were part of it, it was just appreciating what they had done.
They went through a particularly difficult time where they served out in Vietnam, challenging theatre, and the national mood was not supportive of the conflict. In this country, we might have seen something not dissimilar during some of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last decade. Fortunately, whatever people's political views about the rights and wrongs of those conflicts, they did not conflate that with a failure to support the young men and women who were serving. I think we were very lucky on that. I'd just like to make another point. You said you're taking on apprentices and things. People occasionally in this country knock the young and say they are not like they were in my day. The young men and women I have come across in the armed forces have behaved phenomenally and are every bit as good as I was in my day and others were. They deserve every credit given the right opportunities, and it's giving them the opportunities that is so critical, and that's what we must all seek to do, particularly at the moment, because I think the lockdown and the consequences on the economy will affect the young much more than they've affected others, and we need to make sure we can support the young have successful lives and careers, because they are our future.
Oh, I completely agree. We've got some great youngsters working with us. I wish I could have some more, actually, but the ones we've got, I'm sure, will be staying for the moment, and it's in all areas of the business. And I really love their enthusiasm and energy, which also means they can run up and down the stairs far faster and quicker than me, which is great. We've got a lot of stairs.
Well, they can certainly do that.
They
In
help,
your spare time, Lady Carnarvon, come and work for the charity as well. You'd be an absolute inspiration.
No.
Well, in terms of just bringing a different perspective, and listening to how you've managed some significant challenges here at Highclere over the last 4 months, and how you've reshaped the way you provide a service to many, many people, both those who visit and those who access your various internet feeds. That has been a phenomenal journey, and as you say, you probably had to discover things you never thought you had in you quite rapidly over the last few months.
Yes, no, I did actually. It has been, but thank you very much. I think, like others, I've been on this similar sort of journey, but it's the same as everybody else. And I think this virus, which we can't see, which is very small, which is global, not national, and it doesn't know how old we are or anything else about us, has given us all some incredibly tough times. And I just hope over the next year we'll begin to walk again, and then reach out our hands with kindness to those who have had a challenging time, to begin to help them out of where they've got to.
So I think that's a really important point. I think we will be living, this is my personal view, with a series of restrictions for many months, and it could be longer than that. And your point about showing acts of kindness to people less fortunate than ourselves has never been more relevant in recent times. I think we've seen some great examples of that over the last few months, and people need to continue it. And certainly individually, and once again, within the charity that I feel very proud to be a part of, and where you are a great supporter, you and your husband, the Earl,
You've got some great volunteers there.
We have got some great
people.
volunteers, 5,000 volunteers. We supported over 85,000 people last year in various different ways, ranging from visiting elderly veterans. We run a refuge for women and children, victims of relationship breakdown and domestic violence. We provide houses for those visiting patients in Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Birmingham, and the Defence Medical Rehabilitation Centre, and many, many more services. We have some great people and some great volunteers.
And you're very practical, which is what I really appreciate. It's practical, immediate support, and that's what.
So we are the sort of front line of the military charity sector. So if word came to us that I was struggling, one of our 5,000 volunteers would get in touch, come and meet me physically or virtually over the last 4 months, ascertain what the challenges I and my family are facing, and then put in place a solution, which might involve money that might come from SSAFA or might come from many of the other military charities to help us, and I use these words again, regain our independence and our dignity. And that's what we're about.
It's about walking forwards, isn't it?
It's about walking forward, Lady Carnarvon.
One step after another. Andrew, thank you so much for sitting and being my guest today. I really, really appreciate it. And I just wish you all the best with all the great work that you're doing. But thank you for coming today.
So it's been a great honour, a real pleasure, as always, to talk to you, and thank you for your support.
A pleasure. Thank you, Andrew. I hope you're enjoying my podcast as much as I'm enjoying making them. Do let your friends and family know about them. Subscribe. And if you're feeling generous, please leave a review. Thank you.